The season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out and welcome to the VIBS sponsored by Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales in Vancouver. So in this session, if you happen to experience any technical difficulties, please contact me, your moderator, in the chat window, and I'll be helping in any way that I can from where I am. On the other hand, if you think of any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them out in the Q&A box, and then when the time comes, they'll be read out to share with everybody. And at this point, we're good to go. So it's a great pleasure to present John Neal and Amanda Swan Neal with Storm Avoidance and Survival Tactics. Okay, and as soon as they unmute, we'll get to hear them. So please unmute, click the button in the center of your screen.
Unmuted. Well, hello, everybody.
Right.
Hey guys, welcome to Storm Avoidance and Survival Tactics. I'm John Neal.
And I'm Amanda. And avoidance is the key of this seminar.
It's not working.
It's not working.
It's not working. It's not
working.
advancing.
Well, we had.
Okay,
we've got a glitch.
Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Okay.
You got to push it a little harder.
Well, I don't want to knock the thing off. Okay, so storm avoidance. Here I am not avoiding storms, but dealing with Southern Ocean storms. So in the last 45 years, I've sailed the equivalent of, I think, 13 times around the world. A fair amount of that has been in high latitudes because I like weird places like Antarctica and the Svalbard and the Arctic, Iceland, places like that. So inevitably run into heavy weather when you want to go outside the trade wind belt. You could sail around the world in the trade wind belt and never really get that much heavy weather. I left Seattle and Victoria in 1974. I was 22 years old. I knew absolutely nothing. I was on a 27-foot Albin Vega. It was my life savings in that boat, and I had a fabulous adventure in the South Pacific. Wrote a book, Log of Mahina, that became a bestseller. And along the way,
part of your adventure, you got a catamaran along the way.
No catamaran. No, I met a lot of very lovely young women who sailed with me for various lengths of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met an amazing woman in New Zealand when I was headed to Cape Horn and Antarctica. And I asked her if she'd ever sailed before, and she said, just a little.
Yeah, I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag.
Oh.
So it's a big cat, not a catamaran though. So I had sailed from New Zealand to Victoria. It was my brother's birthday, November 25th, which is not a good time to be coming in the Straits of Juan de Fuca from Hawaii. So wrong time of year for a start. When I was a kid on my parents' boat. Well, we helped build the boat, Swan Haven 2. So the boat's still sailing. She's now in the San Juan region. And got kicked out of the nest, found my own boat to go sailing on, became a rigger and sailmaker, and then raced on Maiden around the world, which cured me for racing for the rest of my life, and found John because he sailed into town. And together I decided, we could team up because you're heading for Antarctica. And that seemed like a stormy place, and I could put my skills to probably good use. And you can't stop there racing, or not at the moment.
No. Well, this is the third of 4 programs that we're presenting at the Vancouver Boat Show. Tomorrow afternoon, Amanda will be presenting Diesel Engine Essentials. The cool thing about the Vancouver and Toronto shows are that once the show is over, all of the seminars are posted and available free for 6 months. It's the only show that do that. This book, Storm Survival Tactics, we normally have on hand for sale just at the cost of printing. And if we're back to Vancouver Boat Show next year, we'll bring some along. But do we have a handout for this?
No, because it's in the book.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Well, next year you can pick up the book at the Vancouver show. This is excerpted from one of our offshore cruising seminars. We've done 174 for about 11,000 people. And we're doing our first ever 3-day virtual seminar. It's altogether about 15 hours, I believe. we're doing this at a marine college, a marine training college, and their program chairman, Mike Beamer, is going to be doing part of the presentation. So it's going to be really interesting. And along with that book comes
along with the seminar.
Along with the seminar comes the 260-page Offshore Cruising Companion that is the course book, and that is your guidebook for realizing your cruising adventures. This book has it all, from choosing a boat that will be safe to sailing around the world. The boat that we ordered while we were in Antarctica running expeditions on our previous boat is a Halbergrassi 46. We think we may have sold it today to a gentleman from Toronto. Survey is coming up shortly, but this is a Halbergrassi 46. It's a fabulous boat, stiff, really perfect boat for heavy weather conditions anywhere in the world.
And why did we own such a beautiful, wonderful, glamorous?
Well, I wanted a boat that would be similar to the boat that you guys are going to go cruising on, not an old race boat, and would be powerful and heavy and fast and would be a good platform for teaching. So for the last 32 years, my main objective in life has been training people at sea how to sail their own boats around the world or anywhere in the world. And this has been a fabulous teaching platform. It's taken us...
And we take 6 crews, so it's taken expedition members. The ones who sailed in Antarctica wanted to go north, so they were signed up for our first trip up to Spitsbergen. We've since sailed back to Svalbard and Spitsbergen 3 times.
Iceland.
Yeah, Faroes.
Africa.
We go looking for heavy weather because that's what expedition members want.
We've made 6 Cape Horn roundings. Amanda's made 7, one with a whitbread. We've actually landed on Cape Horn Island 3 or 4 times, something like that. This was our last boat, Halbergrassi 42, an older design, but very sturdy boat. This last summer, since we couldn't return to Mahina Tiari in Auckland because of COVID, we chartered a boat from San Juan Sailing in Bellingham, and we did 4 7-day sail training expeditions, starting in Bellingham, going out into the Pacific Ocean and coming back. The peak winds we got were 46 knots, and you can see that here. And it was a fabulous learning opportunity for all of us, including us, because we've never sailed on a modern boat in 46 knots. This next summer is very exciting. We're sailing 10 expeditions on a Garcia Exploration 45, the boat that was designed for Jimmy Cornell to sail through the Northwest Passage. We've just sailed the boat for 8 hours. It's powerful, fast, very, very exciting boat to sail. And we'll be using this boat again in the future years. The objectives here are helping you choose a boat that will allow you to sail safely in storm conditions.
Weather routing and planning, and I'm glad to hear that there's a weather seminar happening tomorrow, as you can view, because that is the key for avoiding storms. So we'll talk a little bit about how we get our weather on board. Storm procedures is one of the areas we're going to cover.
We have 10 specific tactics that are sequential. As the wind increases, you shift to the next tactic. Well, the first thing we mentioned is selecting a boat that allows you to sail safely in the widest range of conditions. Understanding boat design. This Hunter was never, ever designed to cross oceans. It wasn't built with that in mind, and it's not a good choice. So choose a boat that's appropriate based on your cruising plans. If you're just interested in sailing between Vancouver and Nanaimo, and you watch the weather, you could do that in just about anything. But if you want to sail further afield, let's say to Mexico, Caribbean, South Pacific, then these are some criteria that I recommend you consider. Ability to sail 160 to 200 miles a day. Why is that important? I'm going to have you answer that question when we have the Q&A at the end. A moderate underbody, not a flat racing dish. A moderate keel and a deep bilge. We didn't say a deep keel, but a moderate keel. And a simple and strong rig and a very strong steering system. Protected helm positions very high on the list. And we have an entire book that is posted. It's an ebook. This is what the book looks like. And that book you can download for free. It's just mahina.com/cruise. And this gives you criteria to evaluate boats when you're considering them for offshore. Oh, here's the book. Oh.
It's a different download.
Yeah.
The cruise is the
right.
criteria,
The
and then yes, you jumped ahead of yourself, and then the book is
not unusual.
/book.pdf.
Yeah. So this is a book on the history of yacht design, the development of yacht design, and what makes a good boat. So here's a good boat. This is a Valiant 40. It has a moderate underbody, moderate keel, deep bilge, very solid, super safe boat. Here is a modern high production boat. This is a Oceanus, a Beneteau, and it has a cast iron keel that is a high aspect keel and a high aspect rudder. We'll talk about what this boat will not do shortly. One of my jobs is helping people find boats as a consultant. I don't sell boats. I don't get commissions from anybody. But if I can help you find a boat, it's just mahina.com/consult. There's no time limit. I've helped people for over 10 years, and then I help them sell the boat when they're done. Next is to make sure that you sail the boat. A lot of people buy the cruising boat, but then spend lots and lots of time and money refitting, repairing, replacing, outfitting, getting ready to go, and they forget to sail the boat. They forget to practice heaving to, practice reefing in the dark and sailing at night. Well, I'm a huge fan of headlamps. I can't believe it took so long for them to be invented. And this Black Diamond Spot, which you can buy at MEC or REI, is absolutely brilliant. It's waterproof. The batteries last a long, long time in it. Every year it gets, now it's up to 320 lumens. It's just a brilliant light. It allows you to reef with your hands free, allows you to fill out the logbook without trying to hold a mighty light in your teeth. It's just a really good value. It's not expensive.
Staying on board in storm conditions, so dependable tether and harness. For colder climates, you want a personal flotation device, such as a Spinlock are our favorite.
Spinlock, this new Spinlock Lite Plus, which has a built-in tether, that's what you're seeing here, is just really, really hard to beat. It's you don't even know you have it on. We had one of our students lost overboard off her own boat when a weird wave hit them, and it was the one time she had sailed 15,000 miles with her husband. It was the one time she didn't clip on when she went in the cockpit. They just crossed the Gulf Stream. A weird wave hit him, knocked the Dodger and her off, and she drowned. And so wear your harness and tether and flotation, definitely.
You want to establish a sail reduction guide for your boat. So before the wind gets to 55 knots, you've gone through all your reefing procedures and your steps. And you can download this from mahina.com/forms. And we've got quite a few forms that we mentioned in the seminar that you can then adapt to your own boat.
So I'm a pilot, and with airplanes, we have checklists like this for everything. Before you start the engine, there's a checklist. And so what we're trying to do is help you get checklists for your boat. This is just a guide. Your boat may be stiffer or more tender than ours, but we'd like you to develop checklists so that in critical situations, you don't have to think. You can just go down the list. Bang, bang, bang. Study. This is a great book. It came out a couple years ago. Tom Cunliffe is an Englishman who writes for Yachting World, and he has written a lot of the RYA books as well. The Complete Ocean Skipper. It has a very good section on heavy weather. Here's another book that came out recently that we contributed to, The Art of Seamanship by Ralph Naranjo, who's a Cruising World editor.
We mentioned reducing your sails, but if you are planning on being in heavy weather for a long period of time, you may want to invest in dedicated storm sails.
I say you do want to invest in at least one. If you're just going to Mexico, maybe Mexico, Hawaii, and back to Victoria, you could just get by with one, either a storm staysail or a replacement main, a storm trysail. You don't necessarily need to have both. More gives you more options, but so here is a trysail.
The main advantage of these storm sails is that it's reducing your center of effort, bringing it from the extremities of the boat, sucking it in closer to the keel, down low. The storm trysail is free of the boom. So this is self-tax like a headsail. A storm staysail is once again not way out in the extremes of the bow, but that energy is being brought back closer to the mast, to the keel.
Here's the trysail up. And full disclosure here, in the last 100,000 miles, we have never had the trysail up other than for teaching purposes. So here's our stern trysail. This was for real in the Southern Ocean, sailing from New Zealand toward Cape Horn before we turned up to Tahiti. Since we don't use the storm trysail or staysail frequently, we put them in dry bags. Each time before we put them away, we wash and dry them so they don't get mildew on them. We take really good care of them.
But they're also accessible too. So they're just under the bunk, grab the dry bag, put it on deck,
Sheets are in it.
ready to go. So
Yeah.
we're not having to dig somewhere deep in the boat.
Amanda's father, Robert Swan, bought an ex-charter boat from Sunsail in
And Mum.
Tahiti.
And
yeah,
Mum.
mum and
Mum and
dad,
Dad.
yes. Bought an ex-charter boat. It had, of course, no storm sails. It was the start of cyclone season, and they wanted to sail from Tahiti to New Zealand, which is a very difficult trip, even at the best of times. Amanda's dad went to the sailmaker at the moorings and said, can you make a super deep third reef that's as deep as a storm trysail? And the sailmaker said, sure, that's simple. All I'll do is just sew on a crew and tack kringle, and then just re-lead the first reef to become the third reef. And now you have 2 and 3 reefs, not 1, 2. Most booms on modern boats don't have slots and sheaves for 3 reefs. So this is what happened on the tack, just sewed in a ring. So it made a very simple solution. Now for a storm, most of you, all of you guys have roller furling Genoas. It's in storm conditions to open the Genoa all the way out, pull it out of the extrusion and slide up a storm jib into the head foil is completely unsafe and out of the question. And so one option, if you don't want to spend the time and money to install a cutter stay or a staysail stay, is to use a gale sail. And this is from atninc.com. And it's just a sleeved storm jib that fastens over the roller furling head sail. So you roll up the head sail, snap this on and hoist it. It's not ideal, but it's certainly better than just using a deeply rolled up Genoa for a storm sail. Radar in storms is fabulous because visibility with the salt particles suspended in the water make visibility really poor. And so radar is really good to tell if there's ships. Having reliable instruments, particularly wind instruments in storm conditions, is really, really important. If you buy a boat that has 25 or 30-year-old instruments on it, you might consider biting the bullet and replacing them with all new Raymarine. We don't get any commission from Raymarine, but their stuff is brilliant. We just replaced all of our instruments in Sweden a couple of years ago, and the new instruments take a lot less power, and the numbers are really big. So old guys and girls can see the numbers for the wind speed, the wind direction, the boat direction from the back of the cockpit. It's just, they're so much more powerful. And if you notice, these are all multi-function displays so that any one of them can be the depth, or check out the far left one, can be the AIS screen if you don't want to turn on your big MFD and suck up more amps. So new instruments, super good choice. Iridium Go is the best possible, lowest cost option for receiving forecasts anywhere in the world at any time, night or day. And the flat fee of $139 for all the data that you can ever use is really super. So we recommend predictwind.com, and they sell Iridium Go and weather forecast packages. Weather planning is really important. And first of all, it's just watching the seasons. Your insurance will be invalid during the storm times of the year, during hurricane season or during winter gale season. The insurance companies are no dummies. Planning ahead and using the same book that the insurance companies use to figure out when your insurance will work is a good idea. Jimmy Cornell's brilliant World Cruising Routes is now, I think, in its 6th edition. It just keeps improving. We've been contributing to it for the last 4 editions, I think. This is a good overview of the weather for every passage in the world. And Jimmy and his son, Ivan Cornell, put together Cornell's Ocean Atlas. The 2nd edition just came out. This has all the pilot charts of the entire world, even of the Med, of Alaska, of truly everywhere. It's a really good planning tool.
It's a good study, but would you need the Ocean Atlas if you just know when you're supposed to go and go?
I think it's really good to have, because sometimes things change, like COVID, and you have to go at times that you didn't plan on. So it's $90, something like that.
So just know what you can expect.
I think it's really good. It's a good resource. Here's just an example of World Cruising Routes, and it's telling you the passage from Fiji to New Zealand, which is one that almost all cruisers who are going west end up needing to make. It tells you the best months and the worst months. Here's one of our students who thought he knew better than Jimmy, and he stayed 1 month too long. A cyclone formed within 50 miles of where he was anchored in Fiji, there was no time for it to show up in the forecast, and he lost his beautiful classic Sparkman Stevens boat. Really not necessary to do that. Learn all you can about the weather. Amanda mentioned the excellent Environment Canada Marine Weather 101 seminar that is tomorrow at 12:30?
Yep.
12:30 tomorrow. So remember that, 12:30 Saturday, Marine Weather 101 from Environment Canada. Going to be worth it. Everything that you can learn about weather. Weather controls your comfort and safety more than anything. We don't find any good basic weather books in North America at all. The best one in the world we found is the RYA, Royal Yachting Association Weather Handbook. It costs about $30 Canadian. You get it from London, just go on Amazon, and it takes 4 days to arrive. It's quite amazing, but it's a very, very simple, concise overview of weather of the world. Windy.com is what we use when we're in BC waters and coastwise. Well, actually, whenever we have internet connectivity. We were just in the Med and in Africa for the first time, and everywhere we were, without exception, we had continuous 4G coverage. And so we could check Windy. We didn't have to use the Iridium Satellite Go hotspot or the Iridium Sat phone. We could just use Windy and cell phone to download free weather, very, very accurate weather. Here's predictwind.com. They truly are the world's leader in ocean weather forecasting. They just keep getting better and better, and their prices are ridiculously reasonable. The only way they make it is that everybody in the world is using them. They're based in Auckland.
So you're subscribing to predictwind.com.
They
do custom weather forecasts for you?
No, they're all automated.
It's all automated. So you're just downloading.
You're just drawing a box and say,
right.
I want weather for here, and I want it this many times a day, and I want this resolution, this
and different
kind of
modules.
Detail. And they have, I think they're up to 5 different weather models that you can choose from. ECMWF, the European Community one, is the one that most everybody agrees is the best. So here's 8 tools for monitoring the weather. The first is really simple. Unfortunately, it's not available right now. It's a Weems and Plath electronic recording barometer. But if you go on Amazon, there's a really small recording barometer. It doesn't have the built-in gale warning alarm, but instead of $200, it's like $39. And the company is something you've never heard of. It's something like RIDL, something like that. If you email me, I'll tell you. We have one of them at home, and it's really, really excellent. And it has a weather forecast icon, which very few electronic barometers do. The next is either an Iridium Go, which is going to cost $600 or $800, or an Iridium Sat phone, or both. We have both. Communications is so important. And if you're relying on internet access while you're going cruising, you've got to have a lot of patience. This is in Panama, trying to download weather charts before we head across toward Cocos Island. And we finally gave up and actually bought a SIM card for our phone, a Panamanian SIM card. Have the tools to receive daily weather charts. These are WeatherFax charts. It's another option. We actually have WeatherFax printer on board Mihinatiari. It's old school, but it's all self-contained, and it doesn't take any user time. Time management at sea, if you're cruising long distances with just you and your partner, is really an issue. The other option is to buy software and a modem, a Pactor modem, and use your single sideband radio to download weather charts. This takes quite a bit more time. The Iridium Go is actually more cost effective and a lot faster. These are grid files. Saildocs.com is how you sign up for them. It's a $200 a year donation for SailDocs. And this is more basic than the weather you would get from PredictWind. We use it very much less and less every year since PredictWind came out, but we still use it occasionally. If you're cruising in Europe, Navtex is absolutely brilliant. It's inexpensive. This unit costs about $200, and it's a radio, stands for navigational telex, and it allows you to receive radio signals up to about 1,000 miles offshore, specifically for coastal weather information, not mid-ocean, and for notice to mariners. And it's free. And there's 60 countries around the world transmitting this data. Unfortunately, only one for all of the Caribbean and none in the Pacific. But in the Med and in Africa and in Europe, North Sea, it's excellent. So just remember, Navtex is for Europe.
going to talk about weather before departure. So what we're watching miles or trying to educate ourselves onto systematic, I guess, specific weather patterns that happen.
Trying to learn the weather, the regional weather patterns. And so the weather patterns off the West Coast of Canada versus off the East Coast are completely different. There's some similarities, of course, but there's a lot of differences. So if you can find a book on regional marine weather of the place you want to cruise, let's say you want to cruise to Mexico, do the Baja Ha. This book in the middle, Mexico Weather for Boaters by Patricia Rains, is absolutely brilliant. There's a new version of the Mediterranean Weather Handbook for Sailors, which we used a lot in the Med. It's great. And on the far left there, Concise Guide to Caribbean Weather, also covers the Atlantic, is out of print, but you can find copies of it on Amazon. These are just 3 examples of regional weather books that are super. Study weather patterns. I'm kind of a weather geek. I'll start studying them exactly a year ahead of when I plan to make the passage, just to understand the patterns.
Well, sometimes you can't understand the patterns and you've got no idea what's happening, and it's time for outside help. So we sign up for a professional weather router. So we use commanders, and we'll pay them to give us a forecast just for us. So they're watching the weather. They've got more modules that they can download and work through, and then they'll send us a custom weather forecast.
This is $70 for a custom forecast. It takes them hours to compose, and it's really good. We will use Commander's weather 2 or 3 times a year, not every passage, but just if the weather forecasts that we're receiving are conflicting and not making sense, then, and if the passage is, for instance, from Victoria to San Francisco, if it's a place that we know there's a lot of weather dynamics at play, we'll pay for a proper professional weather forecast. Now, weather underway. If you're in the Caribbean or Atlantic, there's a great resource available to you. It's Chris Parker. He's an ex-cruiser, or maybe he's still a cruiser, but he started a weather service. He really took over Caribbean weather, and he does a brilliant job. And he comes on single sideband and does a forecast for every island group in the Caribbean. That's free, but then you can sign up to get custom forecasts from him. We really recommend him. Being flexible in relation to your scheduling, being flexible to the weather patterns is very important. We're going to break down storm procedures into 2 categories: what you can do before you depart, and then once you're in a storm, the procedures before departure.
Well, sometimes your insurance may say that you need an extra crew. Certainly these times, if you're heading from Fiji down to New Zealand just with 2 of you and you've never done an offshore passage, they will suggest that you take an experienced person.
Same thing for going down the West Coast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Duncan and Jenica may be 2 fun, loving, friendly Canadians, but
got to make sure they know more than you. That's
yes.
really important, that they will be an asset and not a liability.
You can look for crew. Findacrew.net is a website that specializes in putting captains and crews together. So as a crew member, you'll be paying for the service. As a captain, it's for free, but then making sure you've got experienced crew for passage making.
What are you doing here?
I am depressurizing the pressure cooker.
Okay.
I like to eat well at sea. So for storm preparation, have a good set of recipes. What do you cook in storms? You use freeze-dried.
Oh, that was decades ago.
Yes, or ramen, top
or
ramen.
Soup.
Yes.
No, soup. Lots of soup.
Canned soup.
Soup.
I'd rather get the pressure cooker out, cook something really healthy like
give yourself a plug
lentils.
here. So Amanda just finished the 2nd edition of Essential Galley Companion, and she's got this little pressure cooker icon. This is great for you because it tells you here's a recipe that would be good in storm conditions because it's not going to all jump out of the pot. Well, seasickness in storm conditions is an issue that a lot of us have to deal with. We've had 1,100 people sail with us, and we can't teach if people are puking. So we have a vested interest in helping people avoid and recover from seasickness as quickly as possible. Download this paper, follow the directions, and the chances of you being seasick at all are greatly diminished. Stow all items.
Yes, this is going to be pretty tricky in a storm, this little boat.
Look at those jerry jugs up tied to this.
Don't get me started. I like the barbecue. Or
I like the bananas.
I like, closing cockpit.
Well, it was worse down below. This is going to be a projectile flying projectiles. Now, once you're in a storm, and we will reference the Queen's birthday storm, 1994, the first time that Amanda and I sailed together, we sailed inadvertently into the Queen's birthday storm, in which 6 boats and 3 lives were lost very close to where we were. It was an interesting case study. A movie and 2 books have been written about this. Maintaining responsibility for your vessel means that you have to maintain a watch 24 hours a day, even in storm conditions. You have to look out for other ships.
I think the first thing that people do when they're new storm sailing is that they really over canvas the boat. It's just, you've got to keep the boat comfortable, keep it sailing flat, not start stressing your equipment and rig and sails and crew.
Reef early, reef often.
Yeah.
Keep the boat sailing comfortably.
Hence, we've done that sail reduction guide you saw earlier.
Right. Here is an interesting, this is a couple we interviewed at the Toronto Boat Show, and it's really interesting. They crossed the Gulf Stream. They had no weather forecasting ability, no ability to receive forecasts at sea, and they got into a very rough condition. They were just talking to other boats within VHF range. Nobody knew what to do, so they just made a guess and turned south, which was right into the storm. And so the boat started to fall apart. The bulkheads started coming unglued. The whole hull started to flex an oil can. And they would have been far better served if they had Iridium Go or Iridium Phone and could have called Chris Parker and said, which way do I go? Because Chris Parker will actually answer at 2 o'clock in the morning and help people through out of difficult and dangerous situations.
Keeping the hourly log, so you're watching the transit keeping your position tracked, and then you can also start monitoring where if the storm is coming your way, plotting the storm on the chart. So you then get a sense of where the storm is, what your options are, and what storm tactics you can then start going through.
Get your storm sails ready. So these are our friends Norman Beth Cooper from Vancouver. They've got a Saga 43, and you can see they've rigged their cutter stay, and they have the storm staysail on it ready to go. So all they have to do is roll up the head sail and hoist the cutter sail. Transferring fuel. Hopefully you don't have to carry fuel on deck, but if you do, as soon as there's room in your main tanks, you want to get that fuel off the deck. We don't carry fuel on deck unless we're going to Antarctica, and we have tons of room in lockers to put extra fuel. This was sad. While we were sailing to New Zealand, Beneteau that had jerry jugs lining the lifelines had one of them get loose and somehow or other smash the hatch, and then they were taking water and they turned on the EPIRB and abandoned the boat. So checking the bilge before storm conditions and in storm conditions is a great idea. This is an Antares catamaran. It's got a beautiful bilge, really good access to the bilge pump, good visibility. Charging the batteries before storm conditions is an important thing, and you'll talk about that tomorrow.
A little bit. I'm not a guru on electrical
systems,
but that's why I'm keen on engines, because you've got to have batteries topped up, and that's the electrical system to the boat is the key to keep the boat running. Your autopilots these days, if you don't have wind vane. Yeah.
And
Marius,
Marius, what did you down here?
Mario rigger and something. No.
Inspect your rigging and sails.
Yes.
In storm conditions, that's really important. We have a lot of people that say, I don't want to ever have to leave the cockpit. I want everything led back to the cockpit so I can do everything from there. We say, buy a Nordhaven, buy a long-range powerboat. If you are on a sailboat, you need to leave the cockpit, especially in storm conditions, to check the rigging, to check the mast. We have people do it every watch, which means every 2 hours. Regular deck checks. There we go. All the way around the deck every couple hours. It's amazing how many things you can nip in the bud if you're up there checking versus waiting until there's a problem. We rig something called high lifelines, far safer than jack lines rigged on the deck, which just continually wrap around your ankles and trip you. High lifelines go from the push pit through an eye on the upper shroud to the bow pulpit.
Security call. You maybe need to issue one of these. It's just a blind call on the radio if you've got storm equipment out, such as a drogue or a parachute sea anchor.
God forbid.
Yes, lordy. Or if you're in heavy visibility and you
reduce visibility.
Yes, or heavy visibility, heavy fog.
Yeah. And so this is our favorite radio. It's the ICOM M506, and it has a built-in AIS receiver. And if you buy the optional command mic, the AIS screen shows up on the microphone. So we have this mounted right by the wheel. We just say, whoever's on watch, look at the microphone every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and check and see if there's any ships around. Now, in a storm, you are responsible for your crew, even if it's just your partner and you, but that's really important that you need to maintain that responsibility. You need to keep your crew apprised of what's going on, what your options are, and what tactics you are choosing to deploy. So here's a weather facts chart, and one of our crew is doing a presentation to the rest.
Yeah, it's no good leaving seasick crew in their bunk, just saying, let me die. I just want out of here, like beam me up, because that is not a good policy.
Do everything you can to avoid seasickness and dehydration. Keep hot meals coming.
Yeah, and regular meals. I think hot meals are really key, just that crew
Even
morale.
In the tropics.
Even in the tropics, something hot, something nourishable.
Even, God forbid, freeze-dried. Yeah. I'm never going to live that down.
You're not.
No,
I'm not. Back to lentils again.
Yeah, lentils are good.
Sleep. Yes.
Quality of sleep.
Quality of sleep. So
not rolling back and forth.
Not trying to sleep in your families in the cockpit. Get below, get undressed, get in bed, have dedicated times.
So you guys have all heard about rogue waves. Did you know that the largest rogue wave recorded in the world is off the northwest corner of Vancouver Island? So rogue waves happen. They're a mathematical certainty. And these are the 4 factors that cause them to happen: wind opposing current, shelving, multiple wave trains combining at 120-degree angle, and fetch. Boy, off the west coast, we've got all of those. We've got 5,000 miles of fetch between here and Japan. Examples of places where rogue waves occur are listed here.
Why are we mentioning rogue waves and storms?
Well, because so many times when you read about people in storm conditions, they said everything was going really fine, and then this really big wave whacked us on the beam, and you fill in the broke the rudder, knocked us down, anyway. So Washington, Oregon coast. Now, the Currys are going to be doing a seminar tomorrow on sailing down from
it's the whole
BC.
coast.
Yeah, but sailing the west coast from BC down to Mexico. And they do a great job. We recommend that. So there's tactics. Some people say going down from BC down to Mexico, stay 3 to 12 miles off. Well, we say only do that if you want to catch a Dungeness crab trap line around your rudder. We say 60 miles off is your safest, best bet, best wind, and it still allows you the possibility, the opportunity of making port if you get a forecast for gale force headwinds, which happens 12 months of the year off the west coast.
Well, you can still get the forecast too, so you are monitoring your VHF
precisely weather forecast. 60 miles off, you can still get the NOAA Weather 1, Weather 2 forecast as you go down. And so what we do is stay 60 miles off. As soon as we get a warning of southerly gale imminent, we look at the chart and say, okay, what's the closest place? We have stopped at just about every port between Victoria and San Francisco in the many times we've done the passage. And it's actually fun. And usually it takes only one overnight, and then the wind switches back to northwesterly. Whoosh, you're out of there and surfing downwind. So that was all a long lead in, but here are these 10 specific storm tactics. Well, we already talked about storm sails. That's your first tactic. Above 35 knots, you'll want to put the dedicated storm sails up. There is the gale sail off Ireland. And here we are hoisting the storm staysail. We've rolled up the roller furling Genoa. The trysail is above 45 knots for our boat. It might be different on your boat. Knowing where you are in relation to land is really important because it dictates whether or not you can do, for instance, running downwind under bare poles. Now, forereaching is our second choice. And forereaching is when you put the brake on the wheel or tie off the tiller, you have no head sail, remember that, no head sail, and just a triple reef main or a storm trysail. And if you bought the right kind of boat, it will sail itself upwind at 3 knots or so. This is a really great tactic. Much less chance of damage. Great if you have a catamaran. An excellent choice if your boat will do it. So we got to try that on a Genoa this summer in 47 knots, and it worked really well with it. Thankfully, the owners put 3 reefs in the main when they had the new main built. It worked great, but we had no big seas, just strong winds. This was in
Harrow Straits.
And so we don't know how well the Genoa or Beneteau would do with large seas. I think maybe not too well. So here's the issue. We just don't have enough longitudinal stability in the design with a deep high aspect rudder and keel, the boat can get spun around if it gets knocked on the bow by a big wave. And so it doesn't tend to forereach very well at all, unless you're in flat seas. Now, running or reaching off is what most people think of as their best storm tactic. What are the problems with this, Amanda?
Wow, if you're traveling with the storm, you are going to be with the storm for a long period of time.
Good point.
Yeah. And the waves get big.
The waves get big. And
Certainly in
if
the
you
Southern
have
Ocean.
if you have a modern boat, it will be
Keep
really
surfing.
good. Or a catamaran, it will be good. But as Amanda said, if you're going with a storm, you're going to be in it for a long time. Sometimes storms aren't moving any faster than 10 or 12 knots. And if you're averaging 6 to 8 knots, you're going to be in a while. So the problems are large breaking seas coming from a different direction. And that is the rogue wave that you hear about. Breaking wave hitting the vessel on the beam. The autopilot cannot see the breaking wave, and the boat gets smacked in the beam. Maybe the port lights get blown out. Maybe the dodger gets taken off. Maybe the boat gets...
Okay. Right.
Anyway, so turn the autopilot off. Hands on the wheel is what you need in large sea conditions.
Why hands on the
going
wheel?
downwind.
Why
Because
are you driving?
you can see the breaking wave coming from a different direction. You can change course so that you don't take that breaking wave on the side of the boat. You take it either on the quarter or on the bow.
In the middle of the night, you can see a breaking wave?
You can see the bioluminescence from a breaking wave.
Yeah. I think also you can let go of the wheel.
Exactly.
You're not, if the autopilot's
just let it
always
spin.
fighting the wheel, so you're going to break the autopilot. So you can just let the wheel spin a little bit, quickly grab it, but it's
Right.
sort of like a quick relief valve if hands are on the wheel.
It is. It's like a fuse.
Right.
It's like... So turn the autopilot off. Endurance and skill become really critical. We have lots of people sail the whole way through the Atlantic, across the Pacific, and they get to Fiji and they joke and laugh about, we've never sailed the boat. We've never steered the boat at all. The autopilot always does it, or the hydrovane does it. But they are going to be in trouble when they are in storm conditions. Heaving to is another option that doesn't require active steering. So you backwind the head sail, ease the main out, and adjust the rudder. Inappropriate for multi-hulls, doesn't work well in storm conditions on a modern high aspect keel boat. In flat seas, it works fine. Now, towing warps is a way to slow your boat down. This works great with multi-hulls. If you're going too fast and the boat is getting difficult to steer and you're putting a lot of loading on the steering system, towing something off the back of the boat, a drag device, is a great idea. And so we have 100 meters, 330 feet of 7/8 inch multi-plat line, and we can let this out in a big U behind the boat, and it slows the boat. Well, actually, it doesn't slow our current boat down at all, but a smaller boat or a multi-hull, it would slow you down somewhat, and it actually smooths out the breaking waves. But in waves like this, like we had in Queen's Birthday Storm, forget it. This is in the North Sea, north of the Orkney Islands. Now, a drogue is a dedicated drag device that you hook on, you shackle on, and drag off the stern. So it's easy to shift from towing warp to drogue. You just pull one of the sides you shackle on, drop the drogue in the water, and that will instantly slow you down by 3 or 4 knots. It makes steering a lot easier. This is just a couple different types of drogues. Now, if you have a Beneteau or a Bavaria and you're in storm conditions, your best option is to do what race boats do, and that is just close reach. Just sail upwind with the smallest sails you have, turning and heading into the breaking sea so that you take it right on the bow. This requires hand steering. This requires skill and endurance, and so close reaching is with a storm head sail or a storm mainsail or trysail, but hands on the wheel. So here's a J-boat, and this is a boat that close reaching in storm conditions would be the best tactic. Motor sailing slowly to windward is a tactic that's not frequently talked about, but your family did this.
Yeah, well, we turned on the engine because we had ripped our headsail and things weren't looking too good. So we just wanted, it's basically like perfect storm. We were just chugging into the waves, heading into the storm slowly.
1200 RPM.
Mainsail up.
Yeah,
just
triple reef main.
Ticking over the engine, the boat steadied itself. It was like, took away all the screaming noise of the storm. It was nice.
So we've done this, we've come to this quite by accident. When we were in a big blow off the Oregon coast, we needed to charge the batteries. We were forereaching with just the storm trysail up, and I said, let's just for an experiment, let's charge at 1200 RPM in forward instead of 1200 RPM in neutral. And let's just see what happens. We did. And it was almost like there was a gyro stabilizer because of this, the cyclical, what do you call it? The circular, the torque coming off the propeller. And as Amanda said, the noise of the engine blotted out the screeching of the wind in the rigging, and the people down below said, what happened to the storm? Is it over? It's like, no, actually it's increased, but we're motor sailing slowly to windward. And so this wouldn't work well on a flat bottom lightweight boat. This would work great on a boat like an Island Packet or a Valiant. Don't use it in lying a hull. Lying a hull is when you just take down all the sails and wait until the boat is rolled over.
Well, we think we skipped a slide there. So, well, we should talk about lying a hull. As you said, does have no sails. So you just douse all your sails. Basically, the boat wants to sit side onto the waves and it's just drifting.
Whenever the boat is beam on, it's at risk of being rolled. You need a wave only as tall as the boat is beamy to roll, and that's not a very big wave. So lying a hull is not a choice that we'd recommend. It's just, unless you're in short storms. Here we go. If you're in a tropical squall or line squall where the wind goes from 0 to 60 and back to 0 in 20 minutes, lying a hull is fine. Just take down the sails because there's no sea. There's no breaking waves. There's no rogue waves. The sea is blown completely flat. So here we are. The knot meter is pegged, and we've just taken down all the sail. Now, Lynn and Larry Pardee were huge proponents of the parachute sea anchor storm tactic, putting a large surplus military parachute off the angle of the bow. We have used this. We have tried it. It's not our favorite tactic by any means. And most of the people we have interviewed who have used it in true storm conditions have either broken their rudder or they're cause steering damage. And so it's not a tactic. Here's the rudder head, tiller head fitting broken. It's not a tactic we recommend. It's a challenge to retrieve. Active tactics are far better. This woman joined us on a difficult passage because she wanted to get storm conditions, and she's really happy after we've passed through the storm. She says, okay, I crossed that off my list. I know I can handle storm conditions. We had 47 knots or something like that. And she did just great. She was worried how she'd do, but she's a strong woman. She's Canadian, eh? So here's the perspective. Most cruisers will circumnavigate the world if they're watching the weather in the mid-latitudes without ever seeing sustained winds over 35 knots. Listen to that. That's true. Summary: choose an appropriate boat that allows you to use the widest range of tactics. Prepare your boat and your crew. Plan your passages around the weather. Understand and practice these different 10 tactics, and take care of your crew and your boat.
Yeah. And you'll find that a lot of people get lifted off because the boat broke or the crew broke, or it's, I think, more so if you just take care of yourself, be alert, be aware, go through the tactics sequentially.
Just be cautious.
Just be cautious.
Yeah. And the biggest deal is avoidance.
Right.
And that's why we recommend that you Marine Weather 101 tomorrow at 12:30.
And outside help, having the commanders give you that voice that say, hey, stop, go, don't go. I mean, you're not trying to be the weather guru and make those decisions.
We offer sail training, not on Mahina Tiari anymore, but on the Garcia. And then we'll be in Scotland with 4 expeditions next year. Very, very exciting next summer. And we'll also be doing expeditions between Alaska, the west coast of Vancouver Island. If I can help you find a safe boat to sail anywhere in the world, I'm ready. And then our virtual offshore cruising seminar, there's details of that on our website, which is mahina.com. Our email address is below, sailing@mahina.com, if there's some questions that you have from this. Amanda, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we've basically covered it.
Okay.
Those 10 points go through quickly. And if you have time to go back and review it, look at what's going to be appropriate for your boat. If you're on a catamaran, we wish we had one answer. We wish you could say, we could sell you a device for $2.99 and this is going to get you through storms.
Or sea anchor, that's all you need.
We would be rich by now. I mean,
no, life isn't that simple.
You've really got to keep your wits about you.
Yeah, you got to use your noggin.
Yeah, and keep talking. Don't just sit there and be pummeted.
Okay, so any questions? Well, let me turn it back to Bobby.
Our host.
Right.
Host.
Okay. Well, we have a question from Johan. He says, "What's the best way to handle a rogue wave in a multi-hull?"
Johan, the best way is to avoid being in those conditions. The really nice thing about a multi-hull is that you have, unless you bought an old Prout that's locked in at 100 miles a day, if you bought a fairly modern multi-hull, you have the ability to avoid storm conditions much better than many monohulls will have. Best tactic depends on where you want to go and where the storm is moving. Going downwind on a multi-hull is actually easier than on a monohull, depending on the design. The more modern the design of the multi-hull, the better it handles storm conditions. So going downwind or fore-reaching, we've had several multi-hull experts that have sailed with us that said fore-reaching works great on multi-hull. So no head sail, triple reef mainsail.
You really want to avoid backwards, getting pushed backwards on a multi-hull because your rudders just aren't designed for backward momentum.
Well, thank you, Michael and David, for your accolades. We appreciate that, but we want questions, not accolades. Anybody have some questions about storm tactics?
All right. We have Anne asking, "Does Amanda's second edition cover provisioning?"
Whoa.
Oh, yes. My second edition of the cookbook is totally on provisioning. So it has everything from outfitting to shopping through to Ron Pot recipes. And it's an ebook, so you can download it from Amazon or buy it from Amazon. And it also gets shipped out from Amazon. So second edition of the Essential Galley Companion covers it all.
Great. And we have Kelly with her hand raised. Kelly, if you unmute yourself, we'll hear your question. Go ahead.
What do you guys think about a Hansa 400E? It's offshore.
Not a lot. Never designed for offshore. Designed as a bay sailor. Mediterranean boat.
Okay.
Nice interior.
Good.
Okay.
Now we have Claire. What kind of keels are better for stormy conditions?
Well, Claire, that's a good question. A slightly longer keel, not just a deep, high aspect keel, would be best for stormy conditions because it allows you to fore-reach and it allows you to heave to. Something that a deep, skinny keel, like on high production boats like Beneteau and Genoa and Hanse, they just allow you fewer options. Can you practice fore-reaching in light winds with a triple reef mainsail? Absolutely, Suki. Oh, Suki Spilner. Yes, you can certainly practice fore-reaching. All these storm tactics that we've shown you can be used in moderate conditions. So the first thing is to practice using them when it's blowing 20. Next thing, practice when there's small craft warnings and it's blowing 30. Work it up on that. Any thoughts on the best route across the Pacific headed southwest? We are thinking about doing the Vic Maui and then heading south. Well, Michael, that's the passage that I did to start with. I left from Victoria, sailed to San Francisco, went to Hawaii, and then went south from there. The only challenge that you'll have, Michael, is that you kind of eliminate the Marquesas unless you have a boat that is fairly close-winded. To make it from Hawaii to the Marquesas is quite challenging because you have southeast winds, which are kind of headwinds. But definitely no problem going Vic Maui and then from there to Tahiti. And just depends on how patient you are.
Aren't hurricanes coming through? So you have to watch those, or is that different? Depends on the time of year.
Exactly. June, July, August, September,
Right.
Mexican hurricane season. So you've got to be careful with that. But that's okay because there's lots of warning with them. If you're in Hawaii leaving for Tahiti in hurricane season, which would be your case, it's not a big problem. Can you explain how the high life line is attached to the upper shroud? Yes, it is attached, Richard, with something called an Aladdin cleat, or else there's a rigging company called C.S. Johnson, and you can go on their website and they sell a shroud.
It's called a high line fair lead.
High line fair lead is what C.S. Johnson calls it. So it's just a stainless device that bolts together on your cap shroud, on the upper shroud, and you just run the high lifeline through that. So this allows you to snap on with your tether before you leave the cockpit, go up to the mast, reef, and come back without ever tripping yourself with the ridiculous jack lines do when you have your tether attached to the deck level, wrapping around your ankles as you go forward. How much risk does a furled jib create during storms, and how can you mitigate that risk? That is a brilliant question, Ian. You mitigate that risk by taking the spinnaker halyard, wrapping it loosely around the furled genoa, and then cranking some tension onto it. And that maypole of the spinnaker halyard locks it up.
You still have the sheets though, so you have to run the sheets down and try them off, and then
to the bow cleats, to the bow mooring cleats.
Got, like our clue is so high,
right? When it's all furled.
When it's furled, that it's tricky to.
But if you have enough furling line left on the drum, you can roll the sheets quite a bit after you roll up the headsail, and then just keep rolling them around and around and around.
Yeah,
depends on how you set it up.
Right.
What do you recommend? Where do you recommend attaching the high lifelines? Joseph, if your stern pulpit or push pit and your bow pulpit are not sturdy, we just tie ours off to the pulpits. But if they're not sturdy, we recommend that you simply attach the high lifelines to the bow mooring cleat and the stern mooring cleat. Hopefully those are sturdy. Can you forereach exclusively with a third reef? Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely. A deep third reef is very similar to the size of a storm trysail. And what if the sail has only 2 reefs for coastal cruising? Well, yes, you can still forereach with 2 reefs, but it's going to be a challenge. And so if you have, there's not a simple answer to that. Do you recommend the Jordan Series drogue? Absolutely not.
We skipped over that. You saw it as a brief slide that came through.
Yeah, we showed it. Jordan Series drogue takes a big duffel bag, and it works incredibly well, but it means that your most expensive line, that 100 meters of line, has all these ridiculous little sea anchors tied to it, so you can't use it to tow someone in an emergency, or for a storm anchor, or for tying a line ashore around a coconut tree.
Well, they're using Dyneema now for the Jordan Series drogue. It just means you've just got a big bag of stuff that's only good for one purpose.
Yeah, so the whole concept of a drogue, in reality, in the last 43 years, we've taught with them, but we've never, ever used a drogue. The most important thing to do is to keep the boat sailing, not necessarily slow down, unless it's surfing out of control. Question, how would a Genoa 379 fare offshore? Similar to the Hanse 400E? Yeah, so the Genoa 379, you got to have good weather. The boat's not really built for crossing big oceans, and so just have to be really careful. But we see people sailing around the world in all kinds of boats that many people would say are inappropriate. So
they're just watching the weather, and they just ride out storms. Well,
we have time for one last question. Oh,
all right, here's one. What are your squall tactics?
Our squall tactics are frequently to just roll up the headsail. That's the easiest. We don't have a roller furling mainsail. And so if we see a squall coming, especially if we're off the wind, and if it looks like it's short-lived, if we can see through it, over it, or around it, many times we'll just deeply reef the headsail, maybe roll it down to just 20%. Having a little bit of headsail gives some stability and prevents rolling.
All right, excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions and the end of our session. John and Amanda, thank you so much for a very informative session. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Bobby, and a huge thanks to Linda and the crew at Vancouver Boat Show for inviting us. And you guys have a chance to write out a seminar evaluation.
Oh, you're doing Bobby's job.
Oh, I know I am, but Bobby, I'm going to tell them to write really good evaluations, so we'll be invited back next year when hopefully Vancouver Boat Show will be live.
Sounds good. I'd love to see you there. And also, many thanks to everybody who's attending the VIBS. It's great to have you here. And also, let's acknowledge our very important sponsor, Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales in Vancouver. Please check out all our features online and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, guys.
Night.
See you out in the water. Bye, Bobby.